Welcome back to another video with Ace Spiral. We're going to be doing another spin the wheel of off seasons. I've been really enjoying this website and enjoying talking through teams and figuring out what teams potentially could do in the off season, top to bottom. So we're going to be spinning this wheel. Let's see what we get. The Denver Broncos. Bo Nix. Bo Picks. Bo hurt his ankle really bad in the playoffs. No, I'm just kidding. The Broncos this season had a very good year. Bo Nix played good in some games, average to below average in others. I think that they are really set up for success for the future. Denver Broncos did get the first round bye this year. They played great up until Bo Nix' injury in the last game of the season. I think that it kind of was, obviously it was really unfortunate for the Broncos. They looked like they had a easy chance to beat the Patriots with Bo Nix, and without Bo Nix, Jared Stidham just did not have the ability to take them to the next level and beat them. Obviously, the weather was really bad for that game, so the score was very close and very low. But here with the Denver Broncos, this is going to be a fun and interesting one. This is the first time we have been in the yellow on this website for cap space. I think quite a few cuts will be made. So, to start with some cut candidates, Marvin Mims, obviously a first one up. It seems like this one is an obvious yes. We will save almost $5.7 million on a $6 million deal. Riley Moss is a potential cut candidate as well. You would save all of the money, but he started all year. And as much as people wanted to say that he was bad, he just got penalties called on. I didn't think he was really that bad. He's just nothing when it comes to being compared to Pat Surtain on the other side. I think Riley Moss is going to have a good bounce back season next year. As for Matt Pert, I think he is a cut candidate. As for Drew Sanders, I actually like Drew Sanders a lot in like Madden games. He's super young, came in super young. He is extremely athletic. He's a really fast player and he's got size and speed. But in the NFL, he just hasn't panned out. They've tried to move him from middle linebacker to outside and to play some edge, and they just don't need him there. It's another cap casualty that kind of just makes sense to do. Same with Michael Dieter. Their O line is pretty much set. There's really no reason to look into trying to keep some of these guys on their roster when they don't need them. Now I'm going to go through some of the positions. At running back, RJ Harvey played really well. I actually think that they do need a better running back. I think someone who could step in, and we'll see in the draft on if there's a running back at one of their picks that seems to make sense. But I think a guy like Jadarian Price could be an extremely good true RB1 in this offense, whereas RJ Harvey would be the change of pace back, catch the ball out of the backfield, and Jadarian Price or potentially the guy out of Washington. I'm blanking on his name right now. Maybe he'll come up in the draft. But I think those two guys could potentially be draft picks that the Broncos make, especially with J.K. Dobbins being gone. If they don't want to bring him back, he'd be pretty expensive. Same with Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Beatty. It kind of seems like all these guys wouldn't make any sense to keep. I think Deuce Vaughn would be a cut candidate, again, with them potentially being able to pick up a guy in the draft. For wide receivers, their wide receivers are looking quite thin. It's pretty much Sutton, Pat Bryant, and Troy Franklin. Obviously, all those guys are pretty good when healthy. That's just the biggest problem. Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin both get injured, and so potentially a wide receiver is open for debate in this upcoming draft. As for tight end, we have guys like Evan Ingram, who's old. It kind of wouldn't make sense to cut him. He has a $10 million dead cap, so we would only be saving about $3 million. And the free agents on this team don't really make sense to re-sign. O-line is fantastic. Garrett Bowles, you have him for 4 more years on this contract. He played great. Mike McGlinchey played great. The tackles are set. Ben Powers and Quinn Miners were fantastic. And so I think Ben Powers is a guy that we're going to have to re-sign in going into the offseason because it doesn't really let you extend players. It says you can, but in this, it doesn't really allow you to do that. Ben Wattenberg at center, I don't really remember him being good or bad, which is probably a good thing with O linemen. If you notice them, it's probably because they're not doing well. As for edge, which in this they run a true 3-4 defense, so their edges are actually 4 or 5 tech DNs. So guys like Zach Allen, I'm not even gonna attempt that name. Sue me. Johnny Walker, Garrett Nelson. It doesn't really seem like they'd bring back John Franklin Myers, being him at a $20 million cap hit with 41 million. I think they can find a better D tackle or D end, I guess, in this scheme to plug and play. As for interior D line, it's kind of the same boat. They're kind of set with DJ Jones and Malcolm Roach. So again, maybe a potential pickup in free agency. Linebackers, outside linebackers, Nick Benito and Jonathan Cooper played fantastic this year. They were getting off the ball, they were playing explosive. They are both on extended contracts for the foreseeable future, along with Dre Greenlaw and Jonah Ellis. Some of these other guys don't really get on the field, but running a 3-4, you need a lot of linebackers. So there's probably going to be maybe only one or two guys I cut here that are kind of no names, if you would. As for corner, they have Pat Surtain, Riley Moss. I think Jahdae Barron is someone who could step up big for them going forward and potentially taking over Riley Moss's position. He had a few flashes when he played this year, but I think he was actually injured for quite a bit of the year on and off, or just wasn't playing very much from what I remember. A guy I think they might actually want to bring back is Jaquan McMillan. He played really great in the playoffs, and so potentially being able to bring back Jaquan McMillan and shore up that cornerback room with 4 potentially really good players would make sense to me. As for safety, Talanoa Hufanga played great this year along with Brandon Jones. That back end was fantastic for all the DBs in general. I think that those guys all make sense to keep and not worry about. So it really comes down to running back, wide receiver, tight end, and D end edge in a 3-4 defense, which is a D end, as guys that we will look to pick up in free agency, trade for, or draft. Moving on to trades, we're going to see potentially what some trades are. I don't want to trade for a corner, so that one's off the table. I want to trade for a tight end, except Theo Johnson is a great tight end. I think him and Jackson Dart in that offense, when they get another wide receiver with Malik Willis back and Cam Scadaboo, I think that offense is going to be explosive as long as Harbaugh makes sure that that offensive coordinator is running a system that works for their guys. Jalen Ramsey, again, doesn't make sense. He's old, big contract. Dawson Knox is an expensive trade for candidate in this situation. You could potentially say maybe Derek Hall for the depth at outside, but I also think that's not very good. Same with trading for a backup tight end. You can just draft one. Same again here with a backup tight end, and Buda Baker doesn't really make sense here either. So I'm going to say there's no trades that look appetizing from the trade builder. Now, I am going to personally build my own, see if it's a potential. I think there are a few wide receivers on the market potentially to trade for. I don't really know what's going on with the Brandon Ayuk stuff. If he's definitely not going to be playing for the 49ers ever again. But whether or not they cut him or trade him, it kind of is up in the air on what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if they cut him with either the pre or post June 1st designation, depending on which saves them more money. But it looks here like they would be willing to trade Brandon Ayuk for a 4th round pick. I'm actually going to accept this, or at least offer it, and they accepted. So the Denver Broncos now have Brandon Ayuk in this world. I actually do think it might not be that crazy of a trade, especially because 49ers need cap space. Brandon Ayuk signed a big deal and then just didn't play. He's never going to play for them again. The Broncos need a true wide receiver that is a good route runner when he's healthy, which Brandon Ayuk is. He has reliable hands and he's an athlete. So we'll see how he comes back from this injury, which is why a fourth round pick is probably what it went for. And now we are going to move into actual free agency. It looks like Jaquan McMillan is a restricted free agent. We are going to pick that up along with the Alex Paulus. Alex, I don't know. Not good at pronouncing names. So we'll leave both of those as restricted free agents to keep. As for the rest of these guys, they're all going to be depth guys that kind of don't go anywhere. Quite a few guys on here that say they should re-sign with us. I don't think any of them are worth re-signing. I think we can pick up guys in free agency that are potentially younger or better. So we're going to go by position in this free agency. We aren't going to need a quarterback. We could probably just draft a guy that'll sit behind Jared Stidham and Bo Nix. It doesn't really make sense to try and pick one up. Running backs. I did say that potentially we would draft one, but we're going to go and see who is sitting here in free agency. Obviously, I don't think the computer can re-sign players. So we have quite a few players here that are options, and I'll talk about each of them and their potential on if I think they could sign with the Broncos. With the Broncos having just drafted RJ Harvey, they're kind of looking for a true in between the tackles running back that is powerful. And that's kind of what J.K. Dobbins was supposed to be. But I think at this $10 million price tag that he has, I don't think he's worth it, especially with his injury history. Now, a guy that does run like that is Javonte Williams, who behind a great O-line had a great season this year. I think he would be a quality rotational back alongside of RJ Harvey. And for $9 million, I could see this potentially happening. But I do think that the Cowboys will re-sign him for about that same deal, and he won't want to leave. He's already guaranteed to be that starting running back. It doesn't make sense that he would leave. I think Travis Etienne is really good, and I think the Jaguars will re-sign him. They just traded away Tank Bigsby. They did draft Bashal Tutin, but it looked like Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin, the true number one was Travis Etienne. So I don't think that he will actually be able to hit free agency, whether that's a tag or a re-sign. I think a guy like Tyler Algier would complement RJ Harvey quite well. They run completely different styles, whereas the styles of Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier sometimes would cause Bijan to not get as much of the workload that he should as a true explosive workhorse running back. I think that the Tyler Algier RJ Harvey combination could work out really well, so that is a potential option. Same with a guy like Brian Robinson, between the tackles runner, but I think he also will get brought back by the 49ers. We did just trade for Brandon Ayuk, so it doesn't really seem like any of these signings would make sense. Maybe a re-sign of LaJordan Humphrey, but I don't think that any of that will be in the cards for the Broncos. As for tight ends, this is where I think a guy like an Isaiah Likely could fall. Very athletic, explosive, big wide receiver. Evan Ingram's getting old. It kind of makes sense that they might want to bring him in if they were to cut Evan Ingram, but in this world we didn't. I think a guy potentially like Daniel Bellinger to come in and help block would be smart as well. Moving on to O line, I don't think much of this will be done with O line for the Broncos. They can draft and continue to develop. A lot of these guys will just be rotational or backups, so I don't really see them doing anything, or at least not that I would be able to make any kind of educated decision on for a lot of these guys. So I'm going to skip past the O line. As for edge, I think if we were to pick up a legitimate interior 3 tech to replace um, DeAndre Tillman or a guy like Jonathan Franklin or John Franklin Myers. I think a guy like Danico Autry could come in and fill that role quite well. It seems like that is a type of player. He's older, obviously, but you'd be paying him, a 1 year medium deal. I think actually we will sign Danico Autry to play a 3 tech for a 1 year deal. And he has agreed. Another guy kind of like him is AJ Epinesa. I think he might go back to the Bills. Cameron Jordan is either retiring a Saint or retiring unsigned. As for D line, as you can see, John Franklin Myers, Matt Henningsen, and Jordan Jackson. A lot of those guys don't make sense to re sign, or if they would, it would probably just be either of the 2 restricted free agents or the exclusive rights, which I think we'll actually retain Jordan Jackson with his exclusive rights. So that's about all we're going to do here for D line. I think they can draft another guy to potentially keep in house. For linebackers, I think this is an off ball inside linebacker to pair next to Dre Greenlaw if they're not going to draft one is something that they would really be looking for. And I think a guy like a Devin Bush or a Devin Lloyd, if they were not to resign even to a Kobe Dean, would be extremely good pickups. And so in this situation, we're going to try and re-sign Devin Lloyd if he is here. And with him being 28, a 3 year deal at maybe $12.3 million seems very fair for him. Alex Singleton is old, same with Justin Stranad. Both of those guys getting old, it doesn't make sense to re-sign them. Moving on to corners. Potentially a depth guy down here a little farther would make sense to pick up. Maybe a guy like Rock Yassin or Jack Jones. So in this situation, I think we are going to leave the corners and secondaries away. I think that we can draft guys to fill roles at D-line, running back, edge, and potentially a backup corner or safety in this situation. So continuing to the draft. Standard 3-round draft. It makes the most sense with me having, a typical ball knowledge. I'm just a ball knower. I'm not a deep cut guy, but I like to think I know ball. 3rd round's about where ball knowing starts coming into deep cuts. So the Denver Broncos do have the 30th overall pick. And I do not expect them to trade. If anything, maybe a trade out of this position would make sense to try and get some more draft capital. Here at pick 30, I think CJ Allen would be a great pick if we hadn't signed Devin Lloyd in the offseason. I do think he would be a great fit in Denver next to Dre Greenlaw. Caleb Banks as a D lineman is someone who I'm definitely looking at potentially drafting in this position. Maybe a Brandon Cisse or a Lee Hunter could also potentially fit in good in this kind of position. If they wanted to go O lineman, I could see them either going Max Iannachor or Emmanuel Pregnon. And for a big, crazy athlete wide receiver, Chris Brazzell, the second from Tennessee, is insanely big. I think he's 6'5" and moves at crazy speeds, and like a guy who is 6'5" shouldn't move. So potentially one of those guys could slide into this Denver pick. Looking at the trades, it looks like Denver would get pick 50 in a future pick, which it doesn't specify. And then if they were to trade with Kansas City, which they definitely wouldn't do, I don't think. Trading interdivision doesn't usually happen. We've seen it a few times, but you really don't typically trade with teams inside of your division. We're not going to accept either of those trades. I think we're just going to stick and pick. And I'm thinking that it makes sense for Denver to go Caleb Banks here to fill in for that John Franklin Myers position. Now, the next pick that we have is pick 62 and then 94. They did have 2 fourth-round picks, but we traded one of those for Brandon Ayuk in this position. Coming up on pick 62, Jadarian Price is sitting there at running back. I don't really think that it makes sense to even really look down this board much, but we will a little bit. Elijah Surratt is basically a Cortland Sutton more athletic version. I think they're very similar in how they play. A lot of back shoulder, deep ball, contested catch players. Jonah Coleman is the other running back I think that they could potentially draft if they didn't want to draft one here. And also a guy like Jacob Rodriguez, I think will go mid-second, early third round. I could definitely see Denver taking a chance on Jacob Rodriguez, who should have been in the running for the Heisman. If you look at his stats compared to Manti Te'o's in a Heisman class that the quarterback stats were lower than any quarterback in the last like 10 years to win a Heisman or being a Heisman finalist. Jacob Rodriguez, I thought, should have been the runner up, if not the winner of the Heisman this year. I love Fernando Mendoza, and I think he's going to be a great NFL talent. But I thought Jacob Rodriguez went completely overlooked and should not have been this offseason. Or not this offseason, but this Heisman season. If we go to running back, I think Jadarian Price and Jonah Coleman are 2 very good options. I also think a guy like Nick Singleton down the board would be really good for a late round pick. And even a guy like Roman Hemby or Noah Whittington. Adam Randall is, if I believe I'm thinking of the right person, is a ex wide receiver turned running back who I believe is 6'3", 220, basically a new Derrick Henry, just transferred to play running back, I believe just last year. And I think a team that picks him up with his wide receiver skills and his size out of the backfield, and once he learns how to actually run behind his pads, could be a huge pickup and a late round steal for any team that gets the chance to draft him. But here we are going to be going with Jadarian Price for the Broncos. It shores up that running back room with RJ Harvey and him without needing to re-sign J.K. Dobbins. So with how this board fell, I was looking at potentially taking an edge or even maybe a tight end at this position. A guy like Oscar Delp or Jack Andreas seem like good fits in this offense. They both have very good hands and would fit in as the other version of a tight end, more of an inline to play off of the Evan Ingram off ball tight end. But I think with this pick, going with Caden Curry, 6'3", 260 at edge just for a backup edge rusher. I know that the Broncos have 2 great edges, but you can never get enough players to rush the passer. I think a Caden Curry here is going to be our last pick in this draft. Overview of the offseason. It looks like we did fantastic based on the website. Our cap health is doing good. I believe we structured contracts that made sense to pick up. The needs filled. We drafted for positional need. I could see them signing another running back in free agency, even if it's bringing back J.K. Dobbins. I don't know if they will, depending on his contract wants and the size of that contract. But he is only 28. The injury problems are a concern, but if they re-sign him and draft another guy and have a giant, basically running back competition for the starting position, I think it could be good. We did add Brandon Ayuk to Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, and Pat Bryant. I do think they'll probably draft another wide receiver down the board or potentially sign one in free agency. I didn't do that here. I think for offensive line, they are well shored up. Again, probably a tight end drafted in the 4th or 5th round. As for defense, if we were to show this in a typical 3-4 defense, it doesn't show either of our defensive draft picks. but those defensive players that were drafted were Caleb Banks to step in and play one of those D tackle positions, and Caden Curry at edge. And he could potentially play a 3-4 defensive end, which plays more over the tackle than a true outside linebacker like Jonathan Cooper or Nick Bonito. But I do think he could fit in there quite well. Jaquan McMillan, bringing him back was shoring up this DB room, and I think they could potentially draft another DB down the board or pick one up in free agency for quite cheap. So overall, I think the Broncos are set up for success and are going to be back in the first round bye hunt next year. They make a lot of moves on cutting guys that haven't really panned out for them here, like a Marvin Mims, a Drew Sanders, a Deuce Vaughn was a pickup for them at running back. A lot of these single year, no dead cap money guys get cut in the offseason or just resign or potentially re-sign for the exact same deal. Signing Danico Autry to play in that edge position, bringing back Jordan Jackson as well. Danico Autry will probably play the same position that Caleb Banks does. And so I think having a guy like Danico Autry in there to fill in for the veteran of the role and show him kind of how to play the position, and signing Devin Lloyd at linebacker makes this defense even scarier. The main reason we didn't go after wide receiver is trading for Brandon Ayuk, assuming that he will be healthy and be able to trade for and not just a free agent signing. So this is the Denver Broncos offseason video with Stick to the Model website. But that's just the opinion of a ball knower. See you later.